The shot didn't sound like the training range. It was sharper, meaner, and it cut through the hum of the bass like a knife through canvas. My office window rattled, and before my brain could piece together what was happening, I was running. I cleared the hall, burst through the double doors, and froze at the sight in the parking lot. My wife, Anna, was on the asphalt, clutching her shoulder, blood seeping through her light gray blouse. Standing over her were two men in cheap tactical vests with police patches you could buy online for $20. Behind them, leaning against a black SUV with HOA Enforcement Unit, stenciled on the side in block letters, was Karen, HOA president, self-proclaimed law and order crusader, and the kind of woman who thought yelling at kids for sidewalk chalk was an act of civic duty. Her lips were curled in satisfaction, one manicured hand holding a clipboard, the other holding her phone like she was ready to stream the whole thing. I hit a dead sprint, my voice like gravel and thunder. "Drop your weapons. Now!" The two fakes turned toward me, startled, and for a fraction of a second I saw the flicker of doubt in their eyes, the realization they weren't intimidating some unarmed civilian. I had my sidearm drawn, my badge visible, and my tone made it clear I wasn't negotiating. They dropped their pistols. Anna groaned, trying to push herself upright, but I knelt beside her, pressing a field dressing to her wound with one hand while keeping my weapon trained on the men with the other. "You're okay," I said, more to convince myself than her. Karen stepped forward like she was walking into a photo op. "She assaulted HOA officers," she announced, her voice loud enough for the handful of bystanders watching from across the lot. "We had probable cause to." "You had nothing?" I cut in, my voice sharp enough to make her flinch. "They're not officers. You're not law enforcement. And you just committed armed assault on federal property." Her eyes narrowed, but I saw the twitch of panic in the corner of her mouth. She'd miscalculated badly. Within minutes, real MPs swarmed the lot, securing the imposters and shoving them into the back of military police vehicles. Karen tried to bluff her way out, waving papers that were supposedly HOA warrants, but they might as well have been grocery lists. I knew right then that simply pressing charges wouldn't be enough. Karen's arrogance ran deeper than any single crime. She had built a culture of fear in that neighborhood, using her fake enforcement team to intimidate, fine, and humiliate residents into submission. My wife had been caught in her crosshairs because she dared challenge a bogus notice about our off-base storage unit. This wasn't going to be fixed with a police report. That night, sitting beside Anna's hospital bed, I made up my mind. I wasn't just going to take Karen down. I was going to dismantle her entire little empire and make sure it could never rise again. The first step was gathering proof. I had my MPs pull every scrap of footage from the base's security system. The cameras had caught everything from Karen directing the fakes to block the lot, to one of them raising his pistol and firing at Anna. My body cam and dash cam picked up the rest. But I needed more than just the attack. I needed to expose the entire machine she was running. That's where the twist came in. 2 days later, I got an unexpected call from Sergeant First Class Mark Daniels, an old friend from my deployment days. Turns out he'd bought a house in Karen's neighborhood a year earlier and had been documenting her harassment ever since. "I've got hours of video," he told me. Illegal searches, fake citations, even her telling the officers to plant evidence in people's cars. I was waiting for the right time to drop it. "I think this is it." We met in my office after hours, the desk between us piled with drives, printed screenshots, and notarized witness statements from half a dozen residents. Some of it was so outrageous it was almost laughable. Karen staging traffic stops with flashing lights on a golf cart, demanding inspection fees for backyard sheds, threatening to tow a deployed soldier's truck because it had too much dust. The real kicker? Her HOA wasn't even registered with the state anymore. The corporate filing had lapsed 2 years ago. Everything she'd done since then was completely outside any legal framework. She was, in effect, just a neighbor with a clipboard and a couple of hired thugs in cosplay. By the end of the week, I had a dossier thick enough to make the district attorney raise his eyebrows. And I wasn't just taking it to the DA, I was taking it to the media. I called a press conference on the courthouse steps, the morning sun bright on the flag overhead. Cameras clicked as I laid out the story, piece by piece. The fake police, the armed assault, the sham HOA, the embezzled funds, the residents living under constant intimidation. I held up stills from the security footage, Karen smirking behind her sunglasses, the imposters aiming their guns, the phony HOA warrants with her signature. Karen didn't show up that day, but the next morning her face was all over the news, and it wasn't flattering. By the time the news cycle finished chewing on her, Karen's name was synonymous with fake cop HOA scandal. The district attorney didn't waste time. Charges were filed within 48 hours. Aggravated assault with a firearm, impersonation of a peace officer through conspiracy, racketeering, wire fraud, and a laundry list of misdemeanors tied to harassment and illegal fines. But I wasn't satisfied with just watching her in court. I wanted to break the stranglehold she still had over her neighborhood, the one she'd built through fear, silence, and those ridiculous HOA enforcement thugs. The first move was a coordinated raid. I worked with the DA, the state attorney general, and a federal task force from Homeland Security because those fake cops, their firearms were traced to an illegal trafficking ring tied to 3 other enforcement-style HOA scams across state lines. That link turned this into a federal case, and suddenly Karen's suburban kingdom was on the radar of people who specialized in dismantling criminal networks. We rolled in just after dawn, marked units, unmarked SUVs, and a flatbed tow truck for good measure. Neighbors peered from behind curtains as agents carried out box after box from the HOA office. Laptops, cash boxes, files stamped confidential, that contained nothing more than lists of people she'd targeted for special enforcement. When they opened the garage, they found her patrol golf carts lined up like military vehicles, complete with sirens, LED light bars, and paint jobs mimicking local police cruisers. And then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Karen, standing in her bathrobe on her perfectly edged driveway, trying to scream over the sound of a battering ram hitting the HOA's side office door. "This is illegal," she shrieked. "You can't touch HOA property." An agent from the FBI's Public Corruption Unit just looked at her calmly and said, "Ma'am, you might want to call your lawyer, but make sure it's a good one. Your last one's already flipped on you." That was the twist I hadn't told her about yet. Her own treasurer had cut a deal, handing over bank statements showing that HOA funds had been siphoned into Karen's personal accounts, then used to pay the fake cops under the table. She'd even billed their weapons as security equipment and their bogus badges as community outreach tools. The court battle was brutal. Karen tried every trick: delays, counter-accusations, even claiming I doctored the footage. But the evidence was airtight. Multiple camera angles, timestamps, sworn testimony from residents, federal ballistics reports tying the gun that shot Anna to her hired enforcer, it all lined up. When the prosecution played the clip of Karen herself saying, "If she won't pay the fine, make her pay another way," the jury's faces hardened. The verdict came down like a hammer. Guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole before serving 15. The judge also issued a lifetime ban on her participating in any HOA leadership, management, or enforcement role anywhere in the country. But the real victory came outside the courtroom. The neighborhood, once a place where people avoided eye contact and whispered about Karen's latest target, started breathing again. We held a community meeting in the park she'd once used for her enforcement rallies, this time with picnic tables covered in potluck food and kids running around without fear. The residents voted to dissolve the HOA entirely, replacing it with a voluntary neighborhood council that had no power to fine or harass. Anna stood beside me, her shoulder still healing but her smile stronger than I'd seen in months. She was the one who got the loudest applause when we announced the HOA's official disbandment. People knew she'd taken the hardest hit, and they knew she'd fought back just as hard. Karen's old house went on the market not long after. Nobody wanted it. It sat there, paint peeling, her manicured hedges growing wild, the perfect metaphor for the collapse of her little empire. Every time I passed it, I remembered her standing in that bathrobe, screaming at the agents as her fake authority crumbled. In the end, I didn't just win for myself or for Anna, I won for every neighbor she'd bullied, every family she'd shaken down, every soldier she'd disrespected. And I proved something I've always believed. You don't have to raise your voice to fight tyranny. You just have to shine enough light on it that it can't survive. So tell me, if it were your neighborhood, would you have gone as far as I did? Or would you have stopped once she was arrested?